Hi, I'm over here, just in case I disappear within the film.
So I think we thought that we should start off by talking about how the Precious Knowledge video relates to your community assets maps and how the needs of a community is informed by, like a community assets map is informed by the needs of a community.
I was just like thinking to be aware of the demographics of a school, because if you have a lower income area, you can see it in the school demographics, and you can know like, oh, maybe this area needs a food bank, or like, where is the food bank in this area versus an upper class school wouldn't necessarily need that information.
I said that like the program in the video, it seemed like it gave them like a community and stuff, or they would like they felt supported, like in learning. So maybe like showing them what resources are around them in like schools that don't have that kind of program will maybe help them find a place where they.
Yeah, I put that like you couldn't have like you wouldn't know that you needed a community assets map unless you already identified the deficiencies like within that community and like what areas they were lacking in and where they needed more help, or like where they need to know their resources to help people out. And I thought in like the Precious Knowledge video, like I really don't see like too much how that connects to the community assets maps because they're kind of different. They differ a lot, but I definitely think they're similar in the terms that they provided that class to learn their cultures because they realized that they were deficient in, or like they were a little bit behind in terms of like getting the students engaged, so they decided to fix this problem by introducing something else. And I think that's kind of what community assets maps do, because they realize like something's missing here, here's how we're gonna like bridge the gap and fix that.
Something that I felt like kind of connected was like just like the motivation and the energy from the teachers. Like, I mean, we're learning how to do these community asset maps for our future, for when we are teachers, so we can like find the resources and be able to provide those resources to our students and to their parents, so that they can have that like support and stuff. And I think that's kind of like almost what they did in like Precious Knowledge about the teachers, even though the teachers tended to be people of color that were teaching those classes, so they were able to connect with the students a little bit more. But showing that support and showing that they were there to like teach them about things that they could connect with, just showing that would be a huge, improvement.
Yeah, and I really liked how the teachers built that relationship with their students so they can feel comfortable and make them feel like they are being supported. So like, I guess just focusing on your school and knowing what exactly has to be changed, and not just saying we need to change it, but do it now, before it gets later.
Just want to talk any more about the connection between the two? I think we kind of talked about it last week. Yeah.
So for what do you guys think of like the Vygotsky? That's how it was. Vygotsky article, and about how language and its role in learning. At least that was my question: was what is language's role in learning? And he mentioned that learning was always involved in some type of like external experience being transformed into internal processes through the use of language, and that it's a psychological tool that is critical in like developing one's process for thinking, and that language not only plays a role in like just communication, but also socialization, because there are so many different languages and cultures and communities around the world. So yeah.
That's what I said too. Exact same thing. It'll be hard for them to get that like social aspect of school that he said is important if they're having trouble like communicating. So like making sure that like the students are engaged in class and not like being left out.
And I feel like it just reiterated the fact that language is really important, and like mastering the first language is just as important as learning the new language that might be more common in the area you might have moved to. And I was also curious, like, because it was saying how socialization was like kind of key in learning. You learn from your peers, you learn from your teachers, your parents, and everything. And I was like, well, like, one, language barrier. You can't socialize if you can't speak the language. And I was kind of curious about homeschool kids. I know that's not like necessarily like ELL, but like how do they socialize? That just was something that was kind of rotating through my mind when it was talking about like, oh, you learn from your classmates, like pair students who don't comprehend the information with the students who do. Just like how do those kids do that? And then on top of that, how do you do that with somebody who doesn't speak English? I'm gonna pair you with an English speaking kid. Have fun.
That would be hard.
Yeah, for both of them.
Yeah. And I never really thought about like the homeschooling kids. Like I just assumed like with kids just like obviously in the public school systems. But
I know. I never really thought of that. That didn't even cross my mind. So sometimes I think like from homeschool, what if they go like to high school and they don't succeed? Like what happens there? You know.
I went to high school with a girl who senior year moved into our school, and like she was very well rounded, but that's because
It was her own first year
high school.
not homeschooling.
Yeah,
Okay.
her senior year. And like she was very well rounded and was very easy to socialize with because she's the army brat. So like they homeschooled her because it was easier to have parents teaching her, but like they made her interact with other kids like who were like living on base or something, because I think they spent a lot of time in Germany. So like she interacted with those kids. So she did have that, but like I also just don't know how homeschooling works either.
I think I always had the stereotype too on homeschooling kids like that. The reason why they were being homeschooled is usually because they're moving a lot, or just because they're socially awkward, so their parents choose not to put, which I believe is a bad stereotype to have.
I think they can end up being very socially awkward.
Yeah, because they're like depriving them from like social interaction with kids their own age.
So what if like a student is being homeschooled and the teacher doesn't notice where he's lacking his knowledge like at a specific subject?
Yeah. Because the teacher's kind of the parent, and the parent's not as well. They don't have to have any sort of qualification really, or any like formal training to teach their child at home. So how are they gonna know? Yeah, I get what you're saying.
The student is like lacking on a certain
Or
subject.
if they're not where they should be in terms of their own education.
And I guess it can apply to ELL students because their parents might not know how the education system works in the United States if they're not from here. And so that's kind of a weird like parallel to make where like even kids in public schools like have this connection to maybe kids that don't get public schooling. Obviously not private school because you still have to interact with people. But
I also feel like kids that are like, you know, English is their first language and they are in public school, the only reason why their parents know like if their kids like up to their grade level is because of the communication between the teachers and the parent. But I feel like between the language barriers for the ELL students, between the students and the parents, that's probably where like the unknown factor of like whether your student's below average or, you know, average or above average.
And I feel like oftentimes it's really easy to classify the ELL students as below average and below grade level and such. At my for Compass to Campus, at my mentor's site at Sumas Elementary School, the only kids that are in the reading program that's for like a grade or two below them are 3 ELL students, and they're the only kids in that classroom that are doing that. And it doesn't seem like whenever they do that application, it's a computer program. The teacher doesn't go up and interact with them to see like how they're doing one-on-one. It's kind of just like, oh, they'll learn from the computer. But it's like if you identified the fact that these kids need extra help, instead of just labeling them as behind and letting them stay behind, why don't you work with them extra hard to make sure that they catch up to the kids that are using the on-grade program?
It's that whole idea of not giving material that they can do, giving them material that they can get to, the challenge thing that I was talking about in that first reading.
Yeah.
You have to challenge students. You can't just be like, oh, okay, you're at level with this, so we're going to do this.
Or like you're below, so you're just going to do below work. Yeah, I get what you're saying. It just seems so unfair because you know the kids that are ahead of their class, they're always the kids that get like, oh, we know that this is like, they get extra responsibilities and they get extra opportunities to further their learning. Like, oh, here you can have this extra hard worksheet, or like you can help other kids like further their learning, which benefits both kids. But like the kids that are behind, they don't get those same opportunities because it's not as like high of an achievement as when
it's like my nephew, he's in kinder right now, And you know how when you go to the doctors and if you can't match the word with the picture, they say, oh, they're below or they have problems with their speech. Now, well, my nephew knows Spanish and English, and they they separated him from a kindergarten class with like 6 other students that are all Latinos, and because they're not at the reading level or they're not where they need them to be, so he's just like at a separate classroom for kinder, and I'm just like, what the hell? Like, he's a smart little boy, like we had like a lockdown and stuff this past week, and I was like, what happened? And he told me everything in English. And then my mom asked him, but in Spanish, ¿qué pasó? And he translated everything in Spanish, like, just by listening, like, my mom, ¿qué pasó? Like, he didn't have to, like, just quicks, you know?
Code change.
And I was just like, what? Like, and I was just, like, paying attention to him, and he was saying everything so fluently. I'm like, why do they have them, like, separated in school?
Stereotyping.
I think it comes down to resources too. Like, not with that kind of case, but like when you were talking about earlier, like, because the school that we mentor at is like very under resourced. Like, it's tiny and like so those kids will probably like, I don't know, they don't get like the help they need, or like the teachers don't have the extra help that they need. I don't know.
They're just not getting like equal chance, because like we were talking today, I was talking to some students in my mentor class, and like they were working on Spanish homework, and I was like, oh, I like can't really help you with that. I took German, and they were like, what? That's so cool. And I was like, oh, like what languages do you guys have here? They're like Spanish.
That's all.
We can take Spanish.
That's what it is like in North Carolina. Your choices were Spanish and French.
That was my high school. But like for French, they only had 3 classes, and for Spanish they had 5. So it was like not an option.
I feel like sometimes they do that because they're like, oh, well, we have a lot of Hispanics. Let's just offer Spanish.
That's how it is in North Carolina.
Yeah, but like the kid that I was talking to was like, I speak Spanish. This is the language I speak at home. I don't want to be in this class. And I was like trying to be positive, and I was like, you'll be really good at grammar. And he was like, yes. And I was like, if you want to take another language, take it in college. And then there was that whole pause where they were like, they didn't say it, but I think one of them was like, I'm not going to go to college. And then I was like, take a language in college. If you're interested in learning a different language.
And you guys are at Linden, right?
Yeah.
I find that interesting that you guys say it's like the resources are not good, because like there's Linden, like there's Linden Christian, which is like it's a private school, but they act as a public school when it comes to sports and things. And like that is known as like the fancy school, because all like the white rich kids are supposed to live, because Linden has an area of very like,
well,
I don't know. Yeah, that's what I mean. They're also our enemies, or what is it?
Rivals
from my high school. I just couldn't think of the word. So like I don't know if that was just a stereotype, but like even just like driving through Linden and like some of the areas, so I found that really interesting that you guys were saying it's like the resources are not.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
I feel like that's in every town. Like, I lived in Ripon, this town of Ripon, and it was Ripon High School, and their rival was Ripon Christian. It's always like the rival.
No, I went to
I think it's because
Ferndale.
it's too. I know. It's like
Okay.
Like
Sorry.
our rivals, like in Mount Vernon, our rivals are Burlington Tigers, and then we're Bulldogs.
I feel like we're going off track here by
Yeah.
talking about football rivals. One article that I actually really enjoyed, the like one about the Amazonian tribe.
That was really interesting.
I thought it was really interesting when they talked about this one specific part in the article where they said, well, maybe that there's something wrong, like intelligence level with these people, because they can't count or group things higher than 3, I believe they said.
Yeah.
So they can do 1, 2, and 3, but once it gets bigger than that, they don't do that because they don't have that in their language. And I thought it was interesting when they like did all this test, and they're like, no, it can't be like, there can't be something wrong with like all of them. They don't all have like cognitive disabilities or anything like that. I think it was interesting how people that speak majority languages were so quick to call people that speak a different language like behind, or like they called them retarded.
Yeah.
In the article, and I think it's so interesting, and that relates to like ELL kids too. When there's like people that speak English in like an all-English school, and they just automatically assume that the person that doesn't speak the same language as them is stupid or behind or something like that, because if they're like at a loss for a word, or some things are just not, like, they don't work the same way from English to Spanish, or from obviously English to their, like, the native language of this tribe. Like, the things don't, the languages don't transfer, and I just thought it was really interesting, and it was a really good comparison of how things work today within, like, our schools as well.
My question for this one was, like, comparing that article to the theories of, how do you pronounce his name? Vygotsky?
Yeah, Vygotsky.
Like, comparing that with his theories, and one of the biggest themes in his article was, like you learn from your surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, they're a very isolated group of people,
I
and so so they learned from each other. They learned that, and like their culture is just one where like what you see and what you hear, that's fact, and that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't need, like, to function in our society, we need complexity in our language. That's how we communicate. Obviously, they're doing just fine. Like, they've been around for how many thousands of years, and like are still a civilization. And like, yeah, they're kind of like, I don't need your God, thank you very much, because I can't see it and you haven't either. It's like, you're not wrong. And like he was saying, there are intelligent people. Like, they have some sort of structure to their language. Just because it doesn't correlate with what we consider civilized language doesn't make it a non-language.
They mentioned how their people actively like make fun of other languages and like reject all forms of like other
crooked
people's
head or something.
all other people's languages. Like a backwards tribe wouldn't do that. Like make fun of others. They think that their language is superior. Just like English people, like they think that their language is superior. Every language thinks that their language is the better language.
Or like how like those two cousins came like to the Amazon or whatever, and they got off, and because they have like traveled to a lot of like indigenous areas, they assumed that they knew like right off the bat what they could do.
When they started
having
like their hand
and they were not reacting to it, which proves like that they're so I mean, obviously everyone is different, but like their isolation also like shows like how different that they are from other people, and that we think that we can use the same. I mean, Americans, I'm not sure what they were. But like we can use the same like kind of factors within all the indigenous areas, which isn't true because they're also different.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was interesting how like it was the first language they'd ever found that didn't have like these things that they said were universal
like
in every language.
Yeah,
like they didn't have numbers, color terms.
I thought that was so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you could say it was the color of a berry, or sometimes blood, like to describe red. I think that's so cool.
Yeah,
because like obviously they understand the concept of color. It's just it's like, again, like it's what they see and it's what they hear, so it's a comparison. It's not that they don't. It's just because they don't have a specific. Because blue, it's just like, well, yeah, that's blue, that's blue, that's blue. It's a comparison. Like, that is a similar color to this other thing that I know for sure has that color. Just because it's not red.
but it's interesting, like. Because they don't have like comparison words like that, like just saying this is close to that. They don't even have words like that, which is kind of interesting. Like, because they, like, society grows because, I don't know. He was saying that that's how societies have like gotten better because you like, you know what I'm saying?
No,
I forgot what I'm saying.
Not at all. Not gonna lie.
Like, because they're able to like compare things and like
Without using those
you have like
words.
complex language and sentence structure.
Like sentences within sentences, like they said
Like,
they don't have that.
It's not required to live, but it's how societies have bettered themselves and like how we've gotten to like.
Because you're able to convey more ideas and more thoughts if your thoughts are beyond like I am this, I go there.
Like you have writing and reading, and those have created more intelligence.
Yeah, and I thought it was so interesting, speaking of writing, how they said that they don't have art and they don't they don't keep any sort of tradition or history beyond the generation or two previous to them. And I thought that was so interesting how the little boy came out having a model of like the airboat, plane, or it was a boat, one of those things.
Okay.
And then immediately, like a few days later, it's gone because once it's out of their like mind, it's like whatever, who cares?
Yeah, but
Art has no value.
I was kind of annoyed because like the Everett guy who's like studied them for so long, like the other guy brought it up, like, oh, like he made a plane, isn't that art? And he was like, no, because it's gonna be gone in a couple of days. And I'm like, does that make it like? I still think it's a form of art, or like the kid made something.
I don't think they meant art in the form of like not creativity art. I think they meant art is in the way of like cherished art.
I guess, but I don't know. They still is just like, obviously they can create stuff. It's just like they don't.
Because Everett was a very big like supporter of the fact that these are not backwards people. These are not like unintelligent people. They can do they're smarter, but like they just aren't interested in those things. He kept trying to tell everyone who like visited
Because
those
they
people.
raised like
Yeah, he was like, they're not interested in whatever you have to tell them because they've never experienced that, and they're just fine without it.
But I think because like we were saying about the art thing, it's like because I would say they choose to live in a simpler way of life almost, with like they don't think about like the deep future, I think I said, or the deep past. Like they just literally like think about the present, the things that are surrounding them that day. So when like the art's not there, it's just like not something like they care enough about.
Yeah. Same with like preserving their food.
Yeah.
They don't like do it with salt or with, obviously they don't have refrigerators, but because they don't see a future beyond like dinner tonight. And I thought that was so interesting, but also crazy, but also interesting because I can't not have snacks in my room for when future Jessica gets hungry.
I thought it was also interesting. I don't remember what the word was, and I don't even know how to pronounce it. Was it
Pirahan?
Okay, you guys know
Something like
about,
that.
obviously. About, it was like saying something about going in and out. So it's like they use this one phrase and they put it on the ends of each sentence or something. And so like when they say something, do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Like the
I watched
inflection
it.
they use?
It was in the video, like that last video that they had on.
Was it the male female?
No.
I thought that was weird, but finish what you're saying.
Right.
before we do that.
If you guys don't know what I'm talking about,
What
it's
was
just
that?
like something. It was like the very last video, like on the post 5
Where
section.
it's like a state of existence, right? Where it's like they went away, they came back, but the candle went out. They also
Yeah,
used
it's like
it for
something
that.
about going in and out of existence, and I just thought like how they like use like that one phrase on the end of like each random, like something about turning left or right down the river, or like the candle, or I don't know, it's
And
very
feel like-
interesting.
I feel like it goes back to how their culture is. I can see it and I can hear it. Cool,
Everything's
if
in
not,
like absolutes.
yeah.
Oh yeah, they said that they would condense syllables into one like phoneme.
Yeah.
It would condense
just
a
like-
bunch of syllables.
And then how it's like if it was just like is B one of their things that they have? I can't remember, there are only 6, but then if you say like it's a completely different meaning. And like you were started to say about how like males and females say things differently, not because of like you females speak in a different way. It's like, and they're saying that's not a complex structure of a language,
Right,
like.
Well,
wife
it
was
might
talk-
have been another language that they were talking about.
The wife was talking about how like they lived there for so long, and then finally towards the end of their stay there, she finally started to like understand that. Like I think she referred to it as like singing the language, but like that's so.
Oh yeah, the fact that they can
rad.
sing, whistle, and hum like the language, and they can still have a conversation.
Yeah, and that's how they
between that.
that's how they teach it to their children is by like the singing and the repetition and things like that. Like what?
That's insane.
Wild.
Their
Yeah,
language
it's
might
so
be more
annoying.
complex than ours.
Yeah, right. We don't have any sort of like we can do like inflection for questions, but like it's not the inflection that tells you that it's a question. It's the phrasing of the word that like of the sentence, the syntax of the sentence that tells you that it's
Yeah.
It's
a
almost
question.
a body language too, like,
Yeah.
that we use as we talk to like say like if we have something that's like if we're mad or like.
Yeah.
But I think kind of also goes back to Vygotsky about like social context and just like how you learn these things based off the social cues around you.
Yeah.
And it ends up
Even like hand symbols are different in different countries because like this is a terrible example. Like flipping people off is different in different cultures.
Yeah.
Some
And
people
it's
with
a
your
learn
pinky.
and to learn. Yeah, so like if you're drinking with your pinky up in whatever I used to know. I want to say
The one about signaling that you're gay
or something.
Oh,
Well, and like in Germany, like you know how we count or like 1, 2, like theirs is different. So if you want 2, and you go like this, they like this is 2 to them. And so if they see this, they kind of jump to the 3.
Interesting.
Yeah.
My sister and I go 1, 2, 3. My sister goes 1, 2, and then switches to go like this, which I find really weird. And I've like always thought that was just like 1, 2, 3 is like normal and like
Testing it.
but like 1, 2, 3 is very strange to me.
Well, in sign language, 3 you go like this instead of like this.
Like
this.
This is the way you.
This is, according to my uncle, this means peace in Orthodox, like the Orthodox.
And this is and then Spock's live long and prosper is like the Hebrew signal for like a blessing. And because this is gonna go way off topic, so I'm not gonna go into it and nerd out on you guys, but like it actually holds a meaning in Hebrew, and then Leonard Nimoy did.
Right,
And that's how,
everything
like,
came out.
It's so funny how like we steal that from other like cultures, you know, and like we make it our own meaning.
Yeah, that's why I feel like it's so hard for like English language learners to find a place in a school, because like we're just like, that's cool, part of the American culture now, am I right? And so like they're not just, it's almost like they're not learning one culture, they're learning like every individual, how like every individual person's culture wraps into one like enveloped culture, and then they're like, I need to figure that out.
Do you guys remember what it was called from our linguistics class? I'm not quite sure what it was called. How like another hurdle they have to jump through is like, we don't use words always the same way that like their literal meaning is. Like we use them figuratively as well. Like, oh Amy, like you didn't come to that party, you're such a square. And then an English language learner would be like, she's a square. Like she doesn't look like a square, she's a human.
She kind of like a little pear shaped.
When it's like, no, she was a square because she wasn't a round, duh. But like,
wait, is that what that means?
Oh.
Right? Right? You're
Shaking to
square
the
because
core.
you weren't around.
I'm an English speaker and I didn't know this.
Wow.
Reiterating how hard English is to learn.
Anyway, besides that, the whole point is like, we use so many words beyond their literal meaning, and it means like none of us have to even bat an eye when we think about those things. We're just like, duh, well, fucking Amy, you square. But like somebody else, that would be a really hard thing for them to be like, I'm not understanding this. Like there's such a disconnect in my brain from what's saying and what's real.
Sorry, this one is like.
Well, when we use so many like cultural literacy or like
put that.
pop culture references in like, and like those can vary from place to place. This is gonna sound really weird now, like
Sorry. Yes, you talking.
We're just gonna pause for 1 second.
because it's right by the laptop. Sorry, Joy.
Which, do you want to like refresh it so we can
Yes.
see what the light looks like? Also, sorry. We're taking a quick 2 seconds. Oh, perfect.
Okay.
Still on me.
I forgot what I was saying. Oh, cultural differences. Where like cultural references are. Can you not?
I'm sorry. I'm trying to make
Like, I'm talking.
I'm trying hard,
But I have to
Jessica. I'm
finish
sorry.
important.
Thank you.
Okay. You were
Cul-
saying?
cultural literacy is different for different cultures. So like, we reference so many pop culture things that like somebody from like Mexico might not have. Like, I don't know, different literature that like doesn't spread to different places. Like Harry Potter's pretty universal, in my opinion. So you could reference that with anybody and get it right.
I mean, the Pidalhan people probably would be like,
Different.
Harry Potter? Who's that?
I'm sorry, did you say witchcraft? Not real.
Never
Can't
heard
see
of
it.
Oh, that's so true.
And I also found it very interesting how Karen, is it Karen?
Mhm.
Karen?
Karen.
Kieran?
I don't know.
It was spelled without a name.
Keren.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was Karen, but that's just because I don't know it.
How like she put the
Typical
books
Karen.
aside to understand like the language, but like how like the ladies were singing to their child, but so repetitive. So she would listen to like the vocals and how high and then low pitches, and like I think she was focusing so much like on the books that she was like, you know what, fuck this, and like put the books aside and just started to like focus on her, like as a person, how she was moving, like with with singing. I don't know, just find that very interesting.
That's how you better learn languages when you're immersed in the culture of the language that's being spoken. So I thought that was like the best way that she could have reached them and like understood their language, and she started to be able to sing their language in the end, even a little bit, because she was around them and like immersed in their culture, listening to the way they spoke to each other, listening to the way they interacted with each other, and she was like, I'm just gonna see what I do, monkey see, monkey do.
You're not wrong.
When am I ever?
Always.
I think it was rude to the camera when you said that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other things.
I know, I feel like I would.
It's just interesting how like every culture, you know, like the differences, and like,
Yeah.
when we see it, we're like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
You have to learn so much more than just the language.
Yeah.
You have to learn tone and like freaking sarcasm. Because like I'm a very sarcastic person, so I could, in case in point, like you could say something to somebody who's like starting to learn the language but doesn't understand the culture yet, and so I could say something super sarcastic like, "Yeah, you look great today," and they'd be like,
Thank you.
"I look like a scrub. What are you talking about?" It's like, it's sarcasm. I was making a joke. I'm your friend. Like,
The
I'm
first time
sorry.
I tried to make a sarcastic statement with you guys and you guys didn't get it. I remember it was the first discussion post, like we were meeting, it was about my clipping my mind. Sorry.
It's okay. I never get my own sarcasm.
No one got it?
I don't think so. You guys all like double checked with me to make, you guys gave me the answer when I was being sarcastic.
Oh.
I'm not good at knowing what questions are rhetorical and which ones
I just
are
feel
real.
obligated to answer questions.
Um,
One thing in the Kotsky article, he took a picture of it because my laptop's dying. Somebody else say something while I'm looking for it.
This is also related to the Vygotsky article and is also related to you, Amy Schultz. I thought it was interesting when you said when we're born, we have no prior knowledge of the way the world works or any knowledge really, and you talked about how everything we do and everything we learn is based upon like the environment in which we're raised, and I thought that was like, I don't know, that's really like when we were talking about cultures differ and everything like that. It all depends on your upbringing and such.
Yeah. Well, because like, you're not born, and I know I put this in there, but like you're not born with a religion.
Mm-hmm.
Your parents instill.
Yeah.
I want to say install, but that's computers.
It's instill.
We're not computers. Like, that's something that you are raised to believe. Like, I wasn't. I didn't grow up in like a religious household, so it's not something that like I grew up believing is true. But like for other people, it is very true, and that's like how they're raised, which is all very valid. And like that's where it comes down to like culturally, like the things you learn in different cultures and different households are valid because like that's the only thing like you have.
Mm-hmm.
And like you're not born racist, you're not born sexist, like.
And I like that you said that we learn in schools that don't encourage cultural diversity, because that is so true. We, other than like the Precious Knowledge video, when they realize, hey, we're lacking in cultural diversity, and we're lacking in any form of relatability with our like students and the struggles that they go through. Like, it's very, very common to go to school with people that look like you and talk like you and things like that, and there are a few students that don't look like everyone else and they don't talk like everyone else, and those are the kids that get labeled as an outcast. Like, I went to school at Bellevue, and if you know anything about Bellevue, I was one of the only black kids there, and I'm not even fully black. All the other ones, didn't even belong in that district. They're just there for football, but I'm getting off topic. Anyways, the whole thing is, growing up, because I am mixed race and I do identify sometimes more with my white side because I do look whiter, I never had to feel like there's no one here I can relate to and there's no one here that I can learn from, because everybody kind of looked like me, everybody spoke like me, everybody had similar experiences to me. But you bring someone who's never been in that type of culture or environment before, and suddenly there's nothing there to make them feel like their opinions are celebrated or their culture or their background is celebrated or important even.
That's a good point. That's why I think I've said this before, but like one of the things I really liked about one of the classrooms I worked in is that my teacher did her best to like incorporate all like the diversity of the classroom because it was so diverse. I mean, there were mixed families between like one family was like her mom was Mexican and her dad was Indian and like that. So like you can tell by her name, and she said that like her mom spoke Spanish to her at home, but she had like I'm not sure if you guys know, but like in Indian, like they have the sing for like men, and then they have car for women, which is like. Okay, never mind.
Wait, they have what? No, that's interesting.
Like for last names for Indians, like my boyfriend's name is Simmer Paul Singh Basi. So like that's why you have a lot of like sings for last names for Indians. So you can either attach it on to your actual last name or just go by that name. And so for women, they have Car. And so this girl, even though she spoke Spanish, because her mom's Spanish, she had Car as one part of her last name because her dad's Indian. So they incorporated both cultures.
So you could have a different last name than your male sibling? Because of your gender?
Just by like the sing in the car.
That's super interesting.
His sister, I don't know her first name, it's really hard to pronounce, and then it goes Car Basi versus Singh Basi. Yeah. And it's basically to show like everyone in that state in India is equal versus there's like difference.
But is it all over India or just like certain parts?
I don't know. I know I think it's dependent on your religion, but also like the state of India.
India has
super
so
interesting.
many
Yeah.
different. Because I can't remember what. There was this girl. I think her first name, because she was the firstborn, was her dad's last name, and then like she had like the different prefix to her
There's
last
all
name.
sorts of rules.
Like it's crazy.
But like that classroom, sorry, I'll go back on topic, was like so diverse. Like I like the fact that the teacher allowed the students to both share from like what language they spoke at home, like how you do the greetings at home, and then they applied it to the classroom for their daily breakfast. And because some of those families don't have breakfast together, they each, like she pushes all the tables together, so it's one large table, and all the kids sit on the outside and they ask each other how they are, and they like speak the languages that they choose while they say like their good mornings to each other, and then they play a game, which I think is a really good way to incorporate the culture and language like into classrooms.
Yeah, like in elementary, we had this thing every Friday, show and tell. So every little kid would bring something from like their culture. So I thought it was cool. And I would always take candies, like Mexican candies, and then
I like those
sometimes
mango lollipops with the chili powder on them.
yeah, and sometimes like a lot of kids were like, "Oh, this is spicy," and like to me, I'd be like.
You like salt and spicy.
But I thought it was cool, like some would love the candy and some would be like, no.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's always fun to try something new.
I think it's good to like start like letting children know like it's important to try new things while you're young. So when you grow up, you're not like that person who's like super against everything.
I had pad thai or Thai food in general for the first time like a year and a half ago when I started, almost 2 years ago when I started dating my boyfriend, and I was like, holy cow, this is a whole collection of food that I had never had before. That is so delicious.
So
I mean, I only eat pad thai because I'm a very picky eater, but like, it's so good.
Get some pad see ew in there.
It's so
That's my
Good.
stuff.
Sorry.
I've never had it. My friends actually just asked me if I want to go try it. I'm like, yeah.
You should. I've never had Indian food still. I've never had like an actual Indian curry.
Diversity is important.
Yeah.
I love diverse food
That
and
is what-
people.
But like Korean barbecue though, we're getting off topic again. Let's circle back.
My dad though, like, it's funny because like he will not eat anything though. Like he knows he like doesn't want to try or
Yeah.
something.
My dad's a similar way.
But like now he's passed it on to my brother, and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Like, my brother's like, I don't like avocados. I don't like this. I don't like that. I'm like, what? Shut up.
You've never tried it.
Try them.
I was that Brad a little bit about Lebanese food though.
That's
Just
okay.
because I was not comfortable with my culture, but now I love it. The food's so
What's like a big famous plate that
You guys
you're.
are gonna judge me.
I'm not.
It's called lahme kibineye, and neye is meat, and then lahme is meat, and neye is raw. So it's basically like they cut up fresh sheep, like fresh. Like the other day we had it for dinner. They killed the animal the day before, and we had it cut up and chopped for us and small, and you eat it with peanut butter and salt.
Where do you get a sheep?
We have people. No,
We have people. I know. I'm gonna go talk to my
It's like,
sheep
no,
dealer.
guys. Like my family, like they're huge and they cook. Like my aunt has a store down here, so like they have butchers that they're friends with. And they just,
Got a sheep.
but yeah,
We got a fresh supply of sheep.
Fun fact about me.
Well, let's go back to Vygotsky and
I'd rather just talk about food.
No, because I'm really hungry.
Anyway,
there was a line in Vygotsky's article that I really liked. I highlighted it and bolded it, underlined it, and I had a note in the Word document that was just yes. And it was, disability is not simply a child less developed than his peers, rather he has developed differently. And that shook me to the core because it's so true. It did. I was like taken aback at that because it's so true. It's just like, just because you have, like, you're dyslexic, you develop differently. It doesn't mean you're lesser than a kid who doesn't have that. You have to try harder to catch up. Yeah, you do. Should a teacher be willing to go the extra mile to help you catch up? Yes, they should. And that applies so intensely to English language learners. They developed in a different environment than an English speaker. And that doesn't mean they're stupid. And it doesn't mean that they can't catch up. They developed differently. They developed in a household or a society where Spanish or Russian or German was a spoken language and that was a culture. And like I don't remember if it was an article or a teacher or something, but it's like you're smart in your own language and you're smart in your own culture. And like you can't hand.
Beth might have said
Yeah, I
that.
was
Yeah.
gonna say, like, that's something like Beth said last class about in the ELL class was that, like, just because
Ask me a question in English, and if I'm an English language learner, and I might not know the answer, but if you ask me in like my native tongue, I can. I think Nellie was talking about that in class.
Nellie
And then she said an example of Sofia Vergara.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, that's I said that.
Oh,
Jessica said it,
Jessica.
not
I thought Sophia Vergara was the one who's like, I might be.
You should
see
hear.
how
She said you should hear how smart I am in my own language.
And like she's even smart in
English.
like, and like she knows.
Just because she has her thick accent.
Yeah.
Just because
Yeah.
people,
Well,
they
like,
just
Also
because
the
of what
show.
they hear, they
And she's willing to make fun
Or
of herself.
implicit,
And she's like, I don't actually know what I'm saying. Can you help me out here? Like, I don't know. It's just like you shouldn't be embarrassed of the fact that you
I
have a
liked
disability.
one of the people's ideas in our class Tuesday, when we were going over like those presentations about how if a kid doesn't know the answer in English, let them say it in their native language, record it, translate it to English maybe, and be like, oh, they know what they're talking about, they just don't know how to convey that in English. Let's work on
Or
that.
like have them write it. And like, even though like Google Translator is not nearly as close to actual translators.
Yeah, you can go to
but, like,
find someone who speaks that language and be like, what are they saying? I need to know if they know this, and I just need to help them communicate that they know this.
Because you can't expect a teacher to know every single one of the 6,000 or 100, or I can't remember. It started with 6 languages that are in the world. Like, that's impossible. You'd have to be pretty smart.
like realistically, there's not going to be a translator in every class.
No.
Like, so how do we teach them without that? Like,
Yeah, and like what you're saying, like, yeah, find a way to help them. Find a way to figure out what they're saying so they don't become silent. Because that's what puts kids behind, is they don't feel like they can talk, so they won't.
yeah.
And that like kind of reminds me of something. Sorry, back to that classroom I was volunteering in. I was like learning how to like read stories and like create activities while I was reading the stories to the children, and how like there's better ways of doing things. Like instead of letting the students pair up with each other, like how maybe you should pair them up, because there's students who aren't as friendly, or not as friendly, that are a little bit shy, so they won't grab a partner, and then they'll be left alone, and then they won't communicate. And like that one, the first day that happens, they'll kind of like go downhill from there because they don't feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So by pairing the students up, you're kind of like forcing that child to speak to someone else, and just from then on, like they'll be able to build the confidence to like go forward, which I think kind of connects to like what you were just saying, what you guys are all saying.
Yeah.
But,
Like a girl that is in my mentoring class. Like she's like really shy. Like she can speak English, but like she's really shy. And like just by having a mentor, I think it's like kind of she's become like really talkative now. Like when I first talked to her, she wouldn't even look at me in the eye, and now she's
Yeah, you
like
were telling me about that
now
yesterday.
she's like super talkative. Like, and she's like, oh, hey Jessica.
I feel as though those are the people that they need someone to be like, hey, your opinions are important. I'm gonna sit and listen to you even if nobody else has before.
Yeah. I wish every class had that too.
Yeah. Well,
That shows that you're doing a good job.
Well, like one of the girls that I was working with today, she needed to find a book for a class because like their librarian gave her this one that I know a lot of people have really liked. It's like a fantasy one, but it's about like the main character was like a princess and she was gonna go to a challenge to marry the prince, and like this girl thought it was the phoniest thing in the world. And she's like, I was talking to her and like we were trying to find books, and she's like, I just want a small book that's easy to read. I'm a bad reader. And I was like, no, you're not a bad reader. You're an uninterested reader. You haven't found something that makes you want to read. That's your problem. And we're in here, and we're gonna find you a book that you want to read. And like, I think we found one. I'm really excited about
What was
this.
it called?
Maximum Ride. It's a
Oh,
James
I've heard of it.
Patterson book. I really liked it, but like this girl's like, you have to know your students, because like our teacher in that classroom was saying like, yeah, she's kind of tomboy, like likes history, and I was like, yes, I know the books. I have multiple that I've read that she might like, and like I was just like nerding out with this girl, but like you have to like find something that you can make them feel like they're like you relate to them in some way, even if you're just like, it's different being a mentor, but like even as a teacher, like you have to come across as like relatable. And if that means looking into a different culture and being like, what would this student like to read, or like how can I better teach this student?
Or
And
just incorporate things that like are their passion about.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to like it, but you can give them a way to speak about it, or like be
And, like
involved in
taking
it.
the time to be like, what is this specific? Why is this student struggling so much, English language learner or not? Like, what is making it so hard for them, and what can I be doing to like help this individual? Everybody else is doing fine. How can I help you?
Is it that's why teachers do popcorn reading?
Oh, where you like read to a
Yeah.
certain point. Popcorn. We had to do
Hated
the
that.
pop sound at the start.
No, I didn't have to do that sound either.
I hated reading out loud so much.
I feel bad because I am a better reader out loud, and I am a better
We're at 46.
I am a better reader out loud, and I am a better reader just in general than like most other people, and that's just how I've developed. I just love reading, and I do it often. And I remember being frustrated when I would hear other kids read and constantly stop and be like even into high school, you'd have kids in their class that would like stop and stutter on words, and I would just be so frustrated seeing like, why can't you get it? It's so easy. Like, this is the word. Like, come on, move on. And then now that I'm in, well, even before then, even in the back of my mind, I knew it was kind of messed up. But more in this class, I realized that like, even if those kids aren't English language learners, because a lot of them are, people just develop differently. You know, like you said, they just like the thing about disabilities, they aren't necessarily disabled, but like they develop differently. I mean, they don't read at the same level, they don't speak at the same level that I speak at, and that's okay.
And we just need to start changing our vocabulary on how we talk to students too, because like one thing that I've noticed people starting to do is instead of saying handicapped, they're saying handicapable. And so like instead of saying you have like a learning disability, like there need to be more positive things that we can be saying to students, so they don't think like, yes, I'm more stupid than everybody else.
It's good to say things like a challenge or something, because challenges are things that are meant to be overcome.
Mm-hmm.
But disability sounds like something that you can never grow out of or
That
overcome or conquer.
negative prefix of dis, like you aren't able to do this. Good luck. Like, stop being so negative to these kids.
So what do you guys think are overall questions or overall concepts that we touched on that we want to learn more about?
I don't know. My question was about, but we didn't talk about this. It was about the
Pidahon?
language. Like, because I was wondering if that language, does it change? Because you know how in 432 we're talking about how every language like evolves within itself, like all the time. I wonder if theirs does that.
Has developed at all.
Does it develop at all?
Yeah, because they only have so many like phonemes and like they're so freaking stubborn. Like
Yeah.
I don't feel like they do. If they live off the theory of like they don't live in the deep past, the deep future, they just live in the present. How do they have time, or like how are they willing to even change?
and even if they have like there's no way to know
Yeah.
because they only have a past like those like 2 generations back.
Another thing I'm like also curious about when it comes to like the Pidahan people is like, in what way does their language and their concept of like, the not being able to count above 3 thing and like being labeled as stupid, like how does that translate in our schools when we label people as stupid or lesser than because of certain like
And how unaware
language gaps
Yeah.
or language bridges or barriers or
Yeah.
such. Alright. So I think that's it.
Yeah.